Okay, so let's say that you want to graph 2 sine x for the same angles that we've been doing, 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. What I'm going to do is this is telling me to do 2 times the sine value, so I'm actually going to use this y column over here and just multiply them all by 2. Okay, because that's what that's telling me to do. And now I'll go through and I'll plot these points. So we have 0, 0, 90, comma 2, 180, 0, 270, negative 2, 360, 0. So you'll notice this graph is a little bit taller than it was before. Okay, so I'll just do that side. And then if I did the other side, okay, that's what the other side would look like. So what that 2 does to the sine graph, it just makes it taller. So its main effect will be on this amplitude. So let me write that off to the side. So for this graph, the amplitude, so the distance from the middle of the graph here to the top, is going to be a distance of 2 units. So the amplitude is 2 for this graph. It still has the same cycle from 0 to 360, so the period is still 360. Domain and range, the domain's the same. The range this time would be from -2 to +2. Okay. All right, now let's say I wanted you to graph cosine of x minus 1. Bring up my cosine graph. Okay, so let's say you wanted to graph cosine x minus 1. So what I did is I took the cosine values and I subtracted 1 from each of them. So 1 minus 1 is 0, 0 minus 1 is -1, -1 minus 1 is -2. So I just did what it told me, cosine values minus 1. I made a mistake with the first one, so ignore that point up there. And then I'm plotting these points in green. So I have 0, 0, 90, -1, 180, -2, 270 degrees goes back to -1, and then 360 goes back to 0. Okay, so that's what that graph would look like. And let me go ahead and do the other side. Okay, so that green graph is this cosine x minus 1. So what happened is that the whole graph got moved down. So the middle of the graph, or what I like to call the midline, is now right here. This is exactly halfway between the maximum and the minimum. So I'll write midline next to that. And that midline is occurring at the line y equals -1. So this right here is where the middle or the midline of your graph is going to occur. Okay, so here on my board, I'm going to write an equation. So depending on what's going on, if you have a number written right here in front of the word sine or cosine, that value is going to be your new amplitude, which changes the height of your graph, so it'll make them taller, possibly shorter. And then if you have a value attached on at the end, like added or subtracted on at the end like that, that is going to do what we call a vertical shift. So you will take all of the points for sine or cosine and you will move them this many units. And then really what that is doing is it is making a new middle or a new midline on your graph. So if you look at these 2 pictures over here on the right, if I want to find the amplitude and the vertical shift, notice that the units are in radians, by the way. For this first one, first of all, this is a sine graph because it starts at 0, 0. The amplitude, so the height from the top to the middle, so this is the middle right here, the midline. It cuts my graph equally. Both the top bumps and the bottom bumps are the same size. So then the amplitude is this distance. And if I count how many units that is 2 units. So the amplitude is 2. The midline is right here, so it's right here at 0, so I don't really have to worry about that. Down here, this is a cosine graph. The way I know that is because it's starting on the y-axis. It's starting at the maximum value. If I want to try to cut this in half, let's see. I'm going to count this total distance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a total distance of 6. So if I want to cut this in half, let's see, now I have 1, 2, 3 units on top for the top bump, and then 1, 2, 3 units for the bottom bump. This, again, that distance, that 3 units either way, that is called the amplitude. So the amplitude is 3 for this problem. The midline is not at 0 anymore. It was moved up. It was moved up here to 2. So then this equation would have a 3 in this spot, and then it would say plus 2 at the end, and then it would have been a cosine graph, so it would be this. Okay, so this is what we're going to be working on, is trying to identify the amplitude and the midline from a graph, and eventually we're going to get to writing the equations.